Hey everyone, welcome back to Questioning Constructs. I'm Rebecca, and this is
What's going on, y'all? It's John.
A. All right, John, we've got a topic for the day. So I hear, what are we questioning today? What construct are we questioning? What are we
Yeah,
diving into
absolutely.
at first?
Head first, face down, right?
We need to make
Okay.
t-shirts of that.
Wait, one more time?
We need to make t-shirts of that.
Heck yeah, that actually would be pretty dope.
And then on the back, question your constructs.
Heck yeah. Um, okay, so what constructs are we questioning today? So I'm coming up with this a little bit on the spot, as usual. I did not, I did not prepare. Um, but hey, it is what it is. But I do have something that I think would be interesting to talk about. And I'm not just putting words into this sentence to create more time between when I give you the question and when we actually start discussing. I would never do that to you, the audience, or my co-host. Would never. But
I'm dying in
alas,
suspense right
the
now.
question.
Let me help
Uh,
you out. I'll just do a countdown clock and you tell me when you actually have something. 5,
I've
4.
got something. I've got something. I'm just messing with you. I do have something down.
uh,
So today, I think what would be interesting to discuss is the idea of belief versus reality, and the power, or which might be more powerful in each of our minds. I think this is a classic question and a very classic construct. The construct of reality and what it is in our face versus the construct of our perception. So very, very classic. Whereas a lot of the time, I feel like we do ask a lot of personal questions, and where we have a lot of discussions about like self-help and kind of the ideas within ourselves. I thought it'd be nice to kind of take it to a different spot, and see how
mhm.
we feel about these kind of larger themes at play. So let's start with just the basic here. What do you think is more powerful? Do you think it is the reality which we live in, or the belief that we hold, or our perception, so to speak?
Mhm.
Another way of putting the idea of
Yeah.
belief. I have a feeling I know how you're going to answer, but
Mhm.
by all means.
Yeah. Huh. Reality. No, just kidding. Belief systems. I think our beliefs definitely shape our reality. And my advocacy for belief over reality is that even if they're equal, your beliefs keep you in a certain reality. So until you change your perspective on certain things, you're just going to be confronting and seeing the same aspects of that reality. I'll give you a really fun one, right? Um, People you run into. And so let's just talk. So obviously I'm female, but uh, I was talking to my aunt one day and I was like, I had a lot of people, men, approach me or say things or are interested in me, like we're talking about like on the street, right? Not like, oh, I've formally met you and we're having a conversation, and would react to me in a very particular way that is not appreciated. And so I told my aunt one day, I was like, if I want to find like my ultimate partner, and if I want to live in a reality where men treat me a certain way, I actually have to stop thinking that like, oh, like this is just my norm. I attract people who are creepy, or, I have to run into this every day. And so I actively decided to stop thinking about it and start reaffirming all the ways that men actually were treating me with respect and helping me, and just being decent human beings. And when I was talking to my aunt and telling her, because she and I go through similar life themes, but hers was in a different area, and so I was giving this to her as an example as well. And I said, It was like a month or 2 after that I started doing that. I've never run into it since. And it's one of those weird situations where it's kinda similar to, "Oh, like, I really am thinking about buying a car," and if you start thinking about the color of a red car, you start seeing red cars, and you start seeing the model of car that you want. So I think a lot of times our beliefs and what we put our energy and perception into, they do influence our reality way more than our reality is keeping us somewhere, and that's my answer.
It's very interesting,
Mhm.
especially because I come from the opposite side of
I
the spectrum of
figured,
this.
I figured.
Yeah, and it's not to be contrarian, although I can be that at times, and it's not to be argumentative. Um, I think really, I think there is foundational truth that we experience in our
Mhm,
world. And I think that truth is unavoidable, unshakable, and it does not bend. I think that that is something that we, so to speak, don't necessarily have um, the ability to change in and of itself, but we have the ability to work around it. Um, but I like what you said about confirmation bias, which
mhm.
is that idea of like, um, I don't think I'm using the wrong term. It's not confirmation bias. I don't think, right? What
I
is
think
it
it's
when you
I think it's
when
something similar, but you're reaffirming
yeah, you
something that
reaffirm the idea, and so you
yeah.
start seeing it everywhere.
Mhm,
That I wholeheartedly 1000% believe, and I think that belief is powerful. So
mhm,
I don't want it to be confused. I think if reality is the strongest power, so to speak, I think belief is sitting right next to it, barely under it. Um, I
mm,
just I happen to think that some things are immutable. Um, I think we as people are very changeable, and
yeah,
so our perspective changes, our ideas change, and what we can see within the world changes based on those things. But it doesn't change the thing. Um,
uh-huh.
that's how I feel.
So, I think that's really interesting, and I have a counter question for you because so you're using the words universal truth or just like like a truth about life, like there's some things that we absolutely can't deny, like the laws of engagement essentially. Another word for that in a different space is universal laws. And so the universal laws are universal truths, but if you know the universal laws, you can utilize them to your advantage. Um, a one which they're all there. I think there's like 10 to 12 of them. I think. Um, but one essentially, it's not verbatim this, but it is where your attention goes, your energy flows, like those types of universal truths. And so the way that you talked about it was being underneath these truths, like you can't change it. Well, how does thinking about it from the perspective of we're not underneath it, we're utilizing them as tools, how does that change your perspective on whether belief or reality is uh more influential?
It's hard for me to conceptually get down with it. And that's because when I think of reality, I think of things like, do I have an example? If I were to hold up a quarter, right? I wish I had a quarter with me, and I were to ask you what you were looking at, right?
Mhm,
Um, if you were to say a quarter, I would say no, you're looking at a mineral. Um, we have deigned it to be a quarter. We have deigned it to
mhm,
hold value, and our perceptions have changed around what it is. So, in time, this thing that might be worth 25 cents could be worth $100. It could be worth nothing. Um, Technically speaking, we can even do that in our day to day living, right? If I take this quarter and I barter and trade it for some significance, I say, hey, the serial number on this, or there's like some kind of error with the figure's nose on it, making it a special limited edition quarter that you can't get anywhere else. All of a sudden, the value of this thing changed just because I was able to adjust people's perception. Um, but does it change the underlying fact? It is still some type of mineral, metal that I'm holding in my hand. And I think that's what I think about truth, right? Am I utilizing the mineral metal? Sure. I can kind of think about it like that. But at the end of the day, I can't change anything about this thing without putting some force, some energy into it. I can change perspective though. I can change my belief in how I think about it. Like if I went out of my way to think about, you know what? I'm gonna make sure that every time I get change in my wallet, I'm gonna take a look at the change to see if there's anything weird about it. What are the chances that across my lifetime I come across weird pieces of change or that can now be valued more than what they're worth? Exponentially higher, right? I changed my world just by changing my view set, but it's still
So that's actually a hard one for me because we had a conversation long time, a couple of years back, where we agreed that a to be an actual truth, it has to be irrefutable in all situations, right? Like universal truth.
sure.
The reason why
Yeah.
that example does not work for me is because it's only a metal because so you're saying that it's undeniably a metal, but for the same reason why the perception and value changes, the only reason why it's technically a metal is because we've all as a society accepted that it's a metal. But if we started going and saying that it's something else, then it would eventually become something else. So to me, that is not a truth because it can be still swayed and influenced, and maybe one day the bulk of us our society says like metal is not a thing, like
Sure,
so
but like that's for me, I almost equate that to like a conversation of language, right? It's language is
I
a thing where we associate ideas with other ideas in order to communicate ideas,
I
right?
don't think
So
I disagree because language is used to describe, and I'm not describing something. It's the concept of something. So you're saying that a concept of a metal is so undeniable that it will never change. And I'm saying that that's I think is false because all it would take for the majority of the world to say, nope, metal does not exist. And then you're going to get to a point in history where even if there's people that disagree with that and are like, what are you talking about? That's stupid. Um, it will eventually become another truth. But because of the fact that it lies in someone's understanding and perception, I don't consider that an actual truth.
well, here's my question, right? So, in this particular case, I would agree with you that the language behind it would change such that it may not hold its same meaning. But if the language were to change, right, and we have a quarter, right, and say that quarter
Mm,
gets put in somebody's time capsule, and 10,000 years pass, and they discover this capsule after 10,000 years, will that quarter still be a quarter?
I don't necessarily agree with that though. I I think where you're going for though is that per like reality, there's something undeniable about reality, but I think that might be an unclear example to give because it can change just as easily. Like I almost think that you're going for the undeniable fact that things physically exist versus the fact of like why something exists specifically as it is. So
Yeah.
if you're trying to give an example for the fact that we live in an undeniable physical reality, I can kind of understand that, but I think that would just go back to my point that physical reality itself still follows perception, and people perceive physical reality differently.
That's interesting. So I kind of want to examine that because I kind of want to know what you mean when you say that. Because like for me, like when you say that, what I envision is like one person imagines a wall, and then the next person walks through because they didn't imagine the wall. And so it's like a Hogwarts situation where it's like we're on platform 9 3/4, and some
Uh-huh.
people can
Yeah.
walk through and
Yeah.
some people can't. And it's
Yeah.
just, what level are
Yeah.
you on, bro? Are you
Yeah.
on the facet of reality where you can't envision this wall? If so, just walk through. What's going
Well,
on?
I think in a way, yes, that's a very amazing and creative extreme example, but s- the two examples I have for this, one is scientifically based, but there's studies that have shown that like people experience color differently.
Yeah, 100%.
So like I could see a
Your
certain
brother
blue.
is one of them.
Oh my god. So my brother is colorblind, guys. Don't make fun of him. He's such a sweetheart and we love him for it. And it
Just
just
don't
colors
play
our
board
life
games with him.
differently. Aw, no, board games are extra spicy and fun. But take that aside. Let's say like you don't have a color blindness or something that's like medically biologically different. You still
Yeah.
experience colors differently than the next person. So like that's one example where we are kind of living in different realities. But the other thing too that I want to give, similar to your platform where it's like one person can walk through and another person can't, the easiest example of this is people who train as monks and the Shaolin monks. They're able to um like I read an article once where this
They can
one
like
monk.
heat up their palms or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they train so that like after like long experiences in the cold, they heat
Yeah.
their palms up so much so that they can dry a wet
Yeah.
towel or something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I saw that.
Or they've also studied Shaolin monks in meditation and they're able to get to a certain state that like other people aren't just because of the way that they're able to interact with their bodies. And you can say part of that's training, but I also think but I also think it has to do with again your mind, belief and perception. And so at a certain point in time if you are working enough and believing enough in something, then it has to come true. But to do
This
feats that
is
are to that level of extremities where like you probably could walk through walls, like that would take some intense skill set leveling and
Wait, hold on. So that's interesting. You believe that you were, if you were able to just level up to that place, you could do that. You could fission
I
yourself through the wall.
I wouldn't say that it's not a possibility. I'm just saying that I th- I've met people and I've had life experiences where crazy things have happened that are to that level unexplainable. But I think it takes again someone that is incredibly severely dedicated and who has such a mastery of something that then that's an outcome. Have I
So,
seen someone do that specifically? No. But would that
so
be really cool to see? Yeah.
what I'm gonna say is that um, I think there are kind of levels to the reality that we face, right? And
Okay.
so when I talk about like undeniable truths, I am
Mhm.
talking about our physical reality. Um,
Interesting.
things things that are immutable in the sense of that we can all agree regardless of or regardless of what term we use, the understanding of value, the social perception of the thing, that the thing is there. Um, if you are in functioning order, meaning
Mhm.
you are able to perceive in the way that social society is like a really bad. I think you're saying the same thing twice. Social society, but in a way that society can also perceive,
Mhm.
then you all will probably acknowledge that a thing exists. Now, I think that there is a difference between your physical reality and your spiritual reality.
That's
And
what I
I
was
think
thinking.
there's a difference between your spiritual reality,
Mhm.
or your metaphysical
Mhm.
reality,
Mhm.
and your emotional reality.
Mhm.
I think those are varying things, right? But the difference between the other types of reality and the
Mhm.
physical reality
Mhm.
is that the physical one cannot be denied in any way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
You may be able to change your physiology, such as the
Mhm.
monks being able to
Mhm.
heat up their hands through intense
Mhm.
focus. Because
Mhm.
do I think that's out of the question? Absolutely not. You
Mhm.
may be able to swim faster than anybody else because you have webbed feet, and
Mhm.
physiologically you've changed such that you can do better in water. I
Yeah.
believe in the idea of evolution, people
Yeah.
growing, growth of a species, and I believe in change, right? Like,
Yeah.
do I think that there is somebody, do I think spiritually we can connect with each other? And do I think spiritually there are world connections? As somebody who's engaged in activities that uh, confirm that that belief, yes, absolutely. But again, the difference is those things have opportunity to change and develop as me as a person changes and develops. But no matter how much I change, this piece of acrylic is always going to be the piece of acrylic, whether or not I call it something, value it something else. The only reason it would change is if we were to add some additional force to it, to melt it down, to do something else. But even then, I would argue that it still exists. It may exist in a form, the idea of like liquid, gas,
Mhm.
solid,
Mhm.
but it still exists. Even if we were to melt this down, it would still be here, whether
Yeah.
it's gas, liquid, or
Uh-huh.
solid.
So
Um,
you're so to summarize everything and put it into a different way, the way that I am taking in you saying the different layers, it's like anything that's not the physical, so like the spiritual, the metaphysical, is more attached to belief system and like the perception. And then
Absolutely.
but what you're saying is your argument is that the physicality of our world, so not even if we decide that it becomes something else, but just the fact of like existence and the physicality of the world is more influential and has a higher impact and is what drives the beliefs versus belief influencing that physical
Ooh,
world.
I would take that like two sentences back. I think like the first sentence I really liked, and I would, in my mind, the way I kind of think of it or the way I see it is, a wall is a wall is a wall. You can go over the wall, you can go around the wall, you can go under the wall, you can dig through the wall, you can, you can uh, um, do all these types of things, right? But a wall will probably exist, right? Um, Dirt exists, right? And
Right. But where I'm going with this though, our original question was, is it beliefs or reality that's stronger? Or like
yes,
more, and so what I'm saying is you're saying that because of you cannot change the physicality of existence,
hmm,
that is what influences your belief systems
oh,
and
kind
is
of.
more influential. Because what I was advocating for is like I don't disagree with you about the physicality of existence or even of like creation, right? But that aside, everything else to me is like more belief system to interact with that reality and influence it. And that's why I would say it's stronger.
I would agree to some degree.
Hmm.
So like the physicality, excuse me, the physicality of our world, I think, is a higher truth. I think again,
Interesting. Okay.
existence is immutable. I think, therefore I am. Right? Like
Hmm.
the existence of the thing is meaningful because while you can change the form, which is why I kind of feel iffy on that statement of like you
Hmm.
can't change the physicality of this world. We absolutely can change the physicality of
Yeah.
this world, right? But does changing the physicality of the world uh, render its existence mute? And I don't think so. I think it may change existence, but existence in itself, it's like the concept of energy cannot be created or
Hmm.
destroyed,
Hmm.
right? It is there, it exists. And I think that is an undeniable truth for which I don't think it necessarily drives us in any direction. So I don't think it's a power like that, but I
Hmm.
think it is a power in the sense of if you were to tell me I don't know that we're I don't know, I'm struggling to come up with a good example, like a really like unshakable example here. Um, but like the concept of like, okay, this thing is here and it is in our reality. No matter what we do, we can't take it out of our reality. It is the reality. But how we perceive and work around it, do I think that's incredibly strong? And does it
Hmm.
function within our
Hmm.
everyday life? Yes,
Hmm.
absolutely. I do have the feeling that belief is power, but you have to believe in yourself to be, financially successful to kind of overcome your economic status, right? But that doesn't change the fact that
Hmm.
economy exists in your everyday life. Like,
So I do have something somewhere interesting to go with this. I agree with you about, we had a statement one time. I don't know which of us said it, but like creation wants to create and will, therefore go on creating.
yeah.
And, so I agree with you with what you're saying about the physical world, but would that exist if we didn't have beliefs? Because we had a different conversation on this, but it was more so it was you had asked a question, if you didn't feel any of your negative emotions, would you continue to grow? Like what would be the base for growing? And I was an advocate for no, because there is no polarity to understand why you would go to the next level anyways. And we had a whole conversation. It's a different episode. You guys should watch it. It's really good. Um, but similar thing, you know, creation is so strong because we see and believe in creation, and we believe in there is a level, I think, even to belief systems where it's like you do run up against like, I can't run through walls because it's a physical wall. Like that is, that is a truth. And I agree with you about the presence, the physicality of life and creation in that sense. But if we took away the belief that there is a physical world, I'm really curious what to hear your perspective on what you think would happen then.
Um.
Would we just
Okay.
exist but not have
So
physicality? Would it be more
there's a
other?
couple of things here. So I am going to address your question because I think it's an interesting question, and I definitely want to go down that well. Part of this is tough, and I think it's because I don't have the diction to kind of explain my thought processes here, right? So there is one statement. There's a
Mhm,
statement of I believe in a physical reality And I believe that physical reality trumps all other realities, such that those realities work around our physical reality,
Mhm.
but our physical reality remains.
Mhm.
Um, I think there's an extension of that, right, in our everyday lives. So while I can point at the ideas of like the quarter being some type of mineral or metal, and it is going to be some kind of object, physical in
Mhm.
nature, that goes unchanging, even though our perception may change, right? But then I extend it even further with the idea of like that social construct. Economy, our economy exists, right? But your ability to change your financial situation through the
Mhm.
power of your belief in
Yeah.
what you're doing may
Mhm.
change, right? Well, economy as a social structure is not physical in nature. So there's a bit of
Mhm.
something there
Yeah.
that is intangible, and I don't think I have the diction to kind of like speak to
Mhm.
the concept that I wanna pull
Mhm.
at.
'Cause
So I
then that
think
that goes to, sorry, just to interject for a second. I think that's a great point, and it goes with what you were saying about the layers, but then also adding in what I was saying about like belief systems, like, right? Like that's something that we've believed, perceived to be true that's not physical.
yeah,
It's a level of engagement with our society and our world that lays on top of the physical.
yeah. I would agree with that, and I just wanted to clarify, like,
Mhm.
for anybody who is watching, and even in our own conversation, that like even I just made that mistake of like mixing that social construct then with the physical reality. But
Mhm.
what I'm getting at is a truth,
Mhm.
in the sense that this thing exists beyond how we perceive, um,
Mm.
beyond how majority of people
Mhm.
perceive it. This thing exists, right? And we function around it. Now, how we
Mhm.
function within that system, we have the ability to change, right? I believe that that is the thing or the concept that I extend out to be okay, the physical world or the
Mhm.
immutable truths
Mhm.
exist.
Mhm.
And that our belief systems bend around those truths and
Mhm.
utilize those truths to our will,
Mhm.
but it doesn't take away from those truths themselves. I just, again, I don't have the words
I
to
think
put it together.
so. I think we're getting closer to the sense that I think they're both interrelated in a way. Because if we take your layer example, because like I agree with what you're saying, but if you take the layer example and really going back to the original question of is it reality or belief that's stronger? What you're saying is existence is a truth, and we all function around existence, and there's layers to it. So whether or not we were on a physical world, the truth is that existence exists, and
I
then the
th-
belief systems or belief or whatever reality is perceived as, that's what functions around existence, but existence has to be there for all of the rest of this to work,
I think
which is
that's a
what you're
lot closer to what
which is what you're defining reality as. So when
I
we say
yeah.
physicality, it's really just existence.
I think it's closer to how I feel
Mhm.
about it for sure. I definitely feel like it's a closer estimation to how I feel about it. Um, but looking at the question that you asked, because I think it's an interesting question, and I would love to dive down that well.
Mhm.
What would the world look like without that physical existence,
Mhm.
right? Without the
For
physicality of everything.
what would the world look like if we all weren't believing in the physical existence, and if that wasn't like a belief system and a perception? Like would it still be physical in nature?
Ooh,
Because
yes.
and the reason why I asked it, and I was gonna ask you another question earlier about where does spirituality lie? Not spirituality as in like um the physicality of religion, but people have all these unexplainable things. So how did that fit into your concept of this physical reality? But I think this is, to kind of tie all of that together. If you believe in that spiritual level, then there's some part of you that is not physical per se, or maybe it's energetically bound, like, and there
I
are
would
some
agree with
religions.
that.
Huh? Yeah, and there's
Uh,
some religions that believe that, that exists past death. Or like if you believe in the concept of ghosts or whatever, like energetically there's an other after the physical or embedded into the physical. And so that's where I was going with, if we didn't have this belief that we had physical bodies, or if there wasn't a perception of a physical body, do you still think the world would be as physical as it is? Or would it be more on an energetic level, I guess similar to like ghosts or like spiritual experiences or angels or whatever you want to insert into that category, because none of that is necessarily physically bound in reality and very
Um,
perceptionally based on people's experiences.
so as far as believing in like the metaphysical or spiritual, definitely believe in it. I think we all believe to different
Hmm.
degrees. I know you and I have differences in terms of the degree to which we believe
Hmm.
in that space. But I think both you and I have had extensive conversations on like the idea of magic and
Hmm.
what is magic in our world, right? And so, do I think that there's something that we can't necessarily explain, that exists that powers us in some ways? Absolutely. Tell me how your phone works.
Hmm.
Um, tell me how it does. Unless you're a specific type of person, you're unable to. That is a magic box that does magic things that you can't explain, that travels along sound waves that go from here all the way to around the world and pings zeros and ones through sound waves. Like, it's
Hmm.
magic, all right? It's magic. Um, Now, that said, I do believe in the spiritual in the real sense, the way that we would all agree. Um, you know, our ability to see past ourselves, our ability to connect with others, to connect with the universe, so to
Hmm.
speak, to gather information that we otherwise would not have access to. Do I think that there are ways to do that? Sure. I am a believer of those kind of things, for sure. Um, would we have? I think there isn't a way in which the spiritual world, as we're kind of imagining it, could exist alongside of a physical world and the physical world not take precedent. I think in a world in which that exists, where the spiritual takes precedent over the physical, um, I think it's a world that cannot exist. And the reason why is because of our base human needs, base animal needs, are the drivers of existence, right? Not even society, right? We're talking
Hmm.
about existence, right? Animals are going to
Physical
eat
needs.
other animals, right?
Hmm.
So I don't think you can have the two of them together side by side and spiritual be the thing that takes over. Now, can I imagine a world where they're not side by side, the physical doesn't exist whatsoever? That I can definitely imagine. I just can't imagine them linked together and spiritual being more than the physical.
So you're saying that due to the physicality and the laws of our planet, energetically or spiritually, whatever word we're inserting here, has to follow those rules of engagement. Um, Versus like if we were, let's just say in outer space somewhere, let's say there's an alien planet that, you know, is more energetically bound, then the physical wouldn't matter as much. It would defer to the energetic laws of that area, place, and time.
We're
Um,
using energy in a very, very funny way here, because I think we both, um, it's one of
push
those
spiritual.
words that like, uh, even even spiritual,
I
like,
use well, so I think because spiritual sometimes people associate it with religion, and so I'm not just talking about religiously based things. So like
yeah.
energy is my word that I use that's more in my mind more neutral because everything's kind of made up of energy. Spiritual is kind of the realm of the experience. But what I was kind of asking about, so it kind of goes along the same lines of if a tree falls in the forest and you're not there, is there really sound? You know, if there's no one to witness, does that occur? And so the same thing I was asking because I think it's intriguing if we don't have this concept of physicality, or if something starts changing and we decide that physical isn't really that important, like I just wonder how that shift would look like and if our world would exist as physical as it is.
So
um
let me ask this.
mhm,
How could we have that, like, when you look at um some, like, I guess, and again, this might be a conceptual thing where we're thinking in two different concepts, and so
mhm,
maybe what I'm identifying is where we're kind of missing the step between each other. But, like, in a world where um animals exist,
mhm.
but spiritually, um the spiritual nature and the spiritual energy is more important than the physical, and it takes precedence over the physical world. um do like, I would imagine if that was the case, that animal would remain in the same place until it died. It would be born, it would exist for however long it could go without food, water, sunlight, love, and it would die, and the spiritual energy would remain. Like that.
So
That's kind of how I imagine that.
that's super fascinating to me because and the reason why I use energy is because energy is in everything. So if one thing applies to one, it applies to all. But you're taking it as it would mainly just apply to people and not animals, and so therefore animals would be stuck more in a physical world that then they
Wait,
couldn't
no,
function.
I think
Okay, I think we're
we're
okay.
missing
So let
something here.
me.
But this
Okay,
is cool because we're identifying that we're
yeah.
missing something. Okay, so
Okay.
when
So
I'm
let me try again. I
okay,
I was mainly meaning cool, like we were on the same page with the whole physical versus spiritual or physical reality versus belief. But I just had an interesting thought of like if you world functions like it does now, but if you took out the perception and beliefs around physicality, do you think that the world would reality in the physical sense would exist the way that it does? Because we've talked a lot about we both agree that like reality and the existence of something is kind of undeniable. Like things exist and like whatever you want to call it, however you want to perceive it, it exists. And like it's a truth. But my similar to the tree, if you don't have the perception belief, like let's just say one day immediately removed. Do you think that reality and the existence of something it would exist in the same way if we don't have a way of perceiving it the way that we do? Like what do you think that that would look like?
I kind of fall back to that same kind of example of the animal. Like, if you don't have
So
a perception of hunger, if you don't have a perception of thirst, if you don't have a perception of touch, feel,
mhm,
if you don't have a perception for these things, and you do not seek them out,
mhm.
you exist, or better yet, the thing that brings you into this world, right, has no perception of those primary drivers of nature, right? Then how does anybody's existence last beyond that? Um,
So you think
you
that
need those in
existence
order for, like, those are tied to existence. like in and of itself, which is why they can't be paired together. They can exist as concepts separately, right? But if they're tied, one always has to take precedent over the other.
And see, this is where I think we kind of disagree just a little bit, because I actually think you need both and they are connected, and one doesn't necessarily need to be stronger than the other. Um so I can see what you're saying, but in
Oh,
my mind, the way that I perceive it is, if you don't have the concept of physical, like existence, physical reality, what your argument is, something everything will still exist, but you basically die because you're following the physicality of it. My thought is, it would exist but in a different way, and you're not bound to the rules of engagement of physical reality. And so I think that you would have more of what we would think of when we think of like ghosts or spirits, or like, that's what I
I
thought
would
would.
agree. I would agree with ghosts and spirits, but that's because more things are dying. Um,
Well, but I don't know. Do they have to die? Like, if you don't perceive the physical world in the same way and like have those like super solid concepts, I don't know. And that's why I think this is a really fun question, because it makes you think about like how deep the perception of existence and physicality goes. And I don't necessarily share the same thought that the physical rules would be just followed and there wouldn't be some sort of evolution or transition, or the spiritual would take over. But I also think when you're saying that they can't exist in tandem, I do disagree with that, because if you took out the energetic, spiritual, whatever side, well then it's just physical existence, and like but then therefore, like, do we even have a reason to like think and perceive and believe and shift within that energetic realm? I mean, the answer would be no, because it wouldn't exist.
well, what I would say is, and maybe I misspoke.
Hmm.
It's not that I don't believe they can't exist in tandem.
Hmm.
I believe they can. I believe they
Hmm.
do. That's our current world and our current reality that we live in. But I think that if ever they are in tandem, physical is always going to have to take precedence because it'll be the driver of life. It'll be the sustainer of life. Life
Hmm.
gives opportunity for spirituality. Life gives opportunity for energy. But without life as the primary driver for energy and spirituality, it does not exist. If you were to take a piece of dirt and throw it into space and have that dirt never interact with anything ever, right? That is the spiritual world that you're talking about. There is no physicality to it, and anything that's around it is all energy.
But
Does
so
that make sense?
I also think this is it's interesting, because I think it's a very circular conversation, which I think just points out the fact that you can't have one without the other. But and this goes more into the spiritual, like
I agree with that
just
statement too. Yeah.
just giving like an easy example of like Christianity, because most people are familiar with um in Christian beliefs, like your soul lives on after you die, and then there's other religions or belief systems too that say like you reincarnate, or you've had multiple lives, and like your energy, but all essentially like some part of you, some energetic part, does not die. And so that I think that even if you don't have the physical, the spiritual like would still, like, I don't think you need the physical for the energetic to work. But I do think that the physical existence is needed to interact with certain spiritual experiences, but I don't think that it's like fully dependent on it. And if you don't have the physical existence, then that would just cease to be. I think energy is.
I wouldn't disagree with that at all. Like I
Yeah.
said, I can imagine a world
Yeah.
where spirituality exists on its own. What
Hmm.
I think cannot happen is that both of them are running along the same line and one not take precedence over the other. If they're separate things, then absolutely. And do I think that, like, in order for life to be like truly life, do I think they need to be together? Yes,
Mhm.
I do. Right.
Mhm.
So I think that like existence as we perceive it, as we have this discussion and like we all kind of have this idea of what existence is, I think
Mhm.
existence requires this energy that is spiritual, the
Yeah.
soul.
Yeah.
But it also requires the body by which we experience the world,
Uh-huh.
the meat
Yeah.
machine that
Yeah.
that the soul utilizes
Yeah.
to drive experience.
Yeah.
And those two things together make up what what we can understand as
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
reality. I think they're
Yeah.
necessary. Can I see a world where spirituality on its own exists, energy
Yeah.
exists?
Yeah.
Again, I point to my example of like take a rock, hurl it
Yeah.
into space. That
Yeah.
is that energetic world.
Yeah.
The only thing in
Mhm.
space is potential energy.
Mhm.
That's all it is. We might as
Mhm.
well be saying it's spirits,
Yeah.
right? Because that's all it is. It's potential energy.
Mhm.
We ourselves, we already know that we're made of stardust. Like what
Mhm.
does that speak to, right?
Mhm.
So um the physical world though, I think um here's something I'll say. um I don't think you could have a purely physical world without the energetic world. I don't
Yeah.
think that world could exist. I
I
think it
agree.
would exist very, very. It would be like I don't know, like a sparkler. It would light. It would be on fire for half a second, and then it would
Uh-huh.
die out because
I
everything would be so competitive to fill the primal urges,
uh-huh.
that it would be self-devouring.
So
Um,
I was gonna bring this up. I actually think that I was gonna agree with you, but now I'm gonna say potentially no. And the only example I think I have is a black hole. I think that's what you would call a black hole when it's like the absence of like it's sucking all of that in. It's almost like the reverse of having energy.
oh, I don't know about that.
Well, because unless we can prove that things exist in the black hole,
Because we have looked at black hole, right? And they have this what is it? Has like some type of anti-gravity that almost works like an ocean. And so that ocean, the same way our current ocean works, like as you go deeper, the pull becomes stronger.
right?
That exists in the black hole as well. And so I could theorize, right? Like if that is true, and there is a force by which energy is pulled into that thing or light is pulled into that thing and it's pushed in a direction, well that means energy has to exist in that thing some form or fashion because it's moving.
I agree with that, and that's the makeup of it. But in terms of like existence within it, that's kind of where I'm going with that.
I don't know if that would be the same as a pure physical world with no
With
spiritual
no
energy. Yeah, I think that would be a different concept to me.
I still um the only thing I think I disagree on is that they can't run on the same line because I think what we've been saying is to go back to one of your earlier points, I think that you need both, and so I think they do run on the same line. I
Yeah, for
don't
sure.
necessarily, and we've also kind of come to the conclusion that you can't have one without the other, or at least you can't have a physical existence without the spiritual, energetic
I think
side.
I think you can. It would just be very short lived. I think that
But wouldn't
in
you need energy to
our
create it though? So wouldn't like in order for it to be considered a purely physical, like just existence, then that would mean that energy is like nowhere, has never been present, which that's where I kind of struggle of like, well, how does it come to be then?
um
And
actually
that's
that might be, you know what, you might make a good point there. But if that's the case, then what I'll do is I'll kind of revise my thought process
okay.
here and say that I'll go back to that same example that I'm using for brevity's sake. But like taking the rock and throwing it into space, right?
Mhm.
That rock in space surrounded by all the energy. I guess that's an example of that, huh?
Well,
Um,
I don't
it can't
agree.
suffice for both, right?
I don't agree with that one only because rocks still have energy.
The okay, I understand what you mean. Yes,
Yeah, or
I
it's
can
kind of
I can
similar to
get
like
down with
if you
that.
threw a piece of wood, like you could say, "Oh, it's not alive," but technically it is. Like there's energy and signals and everything.
You know what? I do have to give you that one. I kind of not kinda. If I'm gonna be true to myself, I wholeheartedly agree with that. Um,
Or even if you want to go more scientific, for the people who are like, it's a rock. Um, for the Earth is made of rock, but there is electric magnetic pulses. So again, energy, like, you know.
yeah. I think man, yeah. No, you're right. I don't think
But
like in this conversation, I don't think I can imagine just a physical world with no energy. Like I don't think that
and
could exist.
you could
Yeah.
argue now I am not as versed in this, but you could argue with like your space example, take a rock and throw it up. You could argue, well, take a planet or a meteor, whatever, a rock that's already in space. But I almost wonder that probably still has energy too in some way, shape, or
To
form.
some way, shape, or form. Yeah,
But
I
I
can
don't
imagine
like
it.
I wouldn't say that for an
No,
infinite.
I would agree. I you know what I the reason I there's like an exasperation almost with the agreement here is because I agree 100%. It just the me agreeing the exasperation is with myself because I have an internal dialogue where I'm at butting heads. So for those of you who don't know who I am or who have ever seen an episode and have decided to be on for 57 minutes with us, um,
Thank you. It's amazing
um,
conversation.
for me, I am very much somebody who has a firm belief in the foundations of this world and our reality, as well as you can guess. And so I dabble in spirituality. I believe strongly in the fact that it exists, and I think there are things you can do with it, such as I said earlier. However, I don't go as far as Rebecca May here and think that, through extreme patience, somebody would be able to ever vision themselves through a wall. I don't think I'm willing to go that far. But do I think like okay, there are spirits, ghosts? Do I think there are people who are able to utilize these particular energies? Yes, but it clashes with the logic side of me super hard.
Mhm.
And so I always have this constant divide. And my family has a history within a very specific culture from Puerto Rico. And so there's a very spiritual foundation to that culture. And it's a very big part of me. But again, it clashes with the zeros and ones
Mhm.
hardcore. So
Mhm.
I become exasperated with myself in these situations because I'm like, no, a rock doesn't have energy. But then I'm like, come on now,
Yeah.
can I really say that? Like,
Right.
of course, a rock holds some type of energy. Existence in it of itself requires energy,
Mhm.
so it
Yeah.
has to have it.
Yeah.
Um,
And I
yeah,
think too, it's a little bit easier for me. I don't get as I think caught up as John does with the is it this or is it that? Because to me, and I think to come full circle in this conversation, the actual um creation and existence that is energy. Like energy is needed to create. So to me, it's just like they're the one and the same. And so I don't know. I'm much more like, yep, a lot of things are possible, but everything's made of energy and everything. was
See,
created
look, we
in
did it again, right? Like there's this weird thing that we do with like the concept of energy where it is
yeah,
both existence and it is
and
belief.
it is
And
belief and
as
spiritual.
we sit
Yeah,
here having a conversation about which is
yeah,
it's very,
amazing.
very
But
interesting.
maybe,
Yeah.
actually, and this, not that we have to get into this thing. This is a great, like, we've come full circle, but you have a really good point with energy being imbued and embedded in both those areas. But maybe we were asking the wrong question. Maybe it's energy, and then there's two other sides to it: creation and maybe something else, destruction. And like energy is, to go back to your point where I was saying I don't really agree with the fact that they can't be like one line, but maybe there is one line of something, and we weren't defining the one line, and there's two sides, and those two sides cannot run in parallel. So like creation and destruction with energy in the middle would actually make sense.
Well, definitely something we can explore on another conversation where we question our constructs, right?
Yeah, that's a
I
good
think
one. What's your
it
question?
was,
What's
huh?
your question? Or do you want me to
Um,
go? Do you need time?
you go ahead. You want to count down for me this time? No, I'm just
Five,
kidding. Go ahead.
4. Okay. My question. Mm. Ooh. Oh, okay. I have one. I have one. Um, and this isn't. This is going to be around the same topic of what we were talking about. What? Where do you think energy is most concentrated in life? Whether it's your life or just life creation in general, where do you think energy is most concentrated? I'm so curious because I think
Hmm.
that's going to follow the same lines where people are. I think if maybe your spirit, or like if you believe in religion, you're going to be like God, and that's going to be more on the more spiritual
Oh,
side.
that's interesting.
But maybe it's, oh, I don't know, like there's so much energy and just love and human connect, or like just like two people hugging, and that has dual
A
elements. Like,
nuclear bomb. Um,
yeah, that too. Sure, John. Yeah.
hey, there's definitely a lot of energy. It is
That's,
100%
yeah,
based
you're
on
not
energy.
wrong. Yeah,
Um, the
yeah. Or like a
CERN.
sports team. Energy. More passion. More passion. More energy. More energy.
Um,
What's your question? What's your question?
my question is for anybody who is following, who's into any type of anime or weeb culture or any of that, if you could harness your spiritual pressure to come up with whatever weapon or whatever power you want. I think I've already asked this. I can't ask the
No, I don't think you
superpower thing.
have. I don't think you
Um,
have.
how would? Oh no! You know what? I'm gonna be specific. If you could harness your spiritual energies to form one type of device, weapon, or thing, what would it be? Right? I
Amazing.
go to weapon because I think anime, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, we've got swords, we've got spirit gun, like we've got all these different things. But hey, if you like harness your spiritual pressure and you've got like a little pocket computer that comes up in your hand, that's pretty dope too.
Amazing.
What is your thing for all of my nerds out there? And if you're not a nerd and you feel like participating, what is your thing you would harness your spiritual energy to?
That's so good. I have two. I first wanted to say some sort of really crazy animal, but then I also thought of wings. Can you
Mm,
imagine? Like you just get to fly when, oh,
dang.
yeah.
Very very jujutsu, very
Mhm,
Fugashiro
mhm.
from Jujutsu Kaisen.
Yeah.
For me, I have no idea, and I'm gonna have to think about it because I can't speak off the cuff with something so
stay
important.
stay
It's
tuned. You're
I
gonna see his answer in the comments in 5 minutes. All right,
all right,
guys.
y'all.
Well, it was great. Hope you enjoyed another conversation. We are back and better than ever, questioning our constructs, diving headfirst face down for you guys to also question your concepts. Over and out. Love you guys.
Catch you guys later. Bye.
Bye.